Hello, my name is Jiso and I'm reading Master Dōgen's Shōbōgenzō. And chapter 53 is where we are at. Mujo-Seppo, the non-emotional preaches the Dharma. Mujo means the non-emotional and Seppo means to preach the Dharma. Originally, Mujo means inanimate or insentient things. So Mujo-Seppo means inanimate things preach the Dharma. But Master Dōgen's usage of the word Mujo was wider than the usual usage, as if the words cover the whole of nature, human beings as well as mountains, rivers, and so on. Master Dōgen insisted that even inanimate things can preach the Dharma, and at the same time he insisted that human beings can preach the Dharma when they are not emotional. He insisted that anything that is not emotional can preach the Dharma, a viewpoint that profoundly expresses the true nature of Buddhist preaching. I have some issues with that word emotional and not emotional. So the two words he's got here, sentient or insentient. So for sentient, the Japanese is ujo. U means having, jo means feelings or emotion. So sentient beings is similar to having feelings. Mujo, mu is that all-important mu, as in does a dog have Buddha nature? Mu means not having or being without. Conventionally opposed to sentient beings, Mujo means insentient beings or the insentient, that is, trees, rocks, fences, walls, etc. At the same time, in this chapter, it also means the non-emotional, that is, the state without emotion or reality, which is beyond emotion. So I suppose one of the ways of looking at this emotion or non-emotion is that kind of cool-headed and objective way that sometimes when we get caught up in things, we can't see how they really are. You know, they've been whipped up on social media. But when we take a step back away from things, that again, cool-headed, objective view is without emotion. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, let's find a way in. Preaching the Dharma in Preaching the Dharma is the realized universe that Buddhist patriarchs transmit to Buddhist patriarchs. This preaching the Dharma is the Dharma preaching. Preaching the Dharma. I think the emphasis is on preaching the Dharma. So the idea is I'm standing here and telling you stuff, I'm preaching the Dharma. And then the Dharma preaching is as if the Dharma is communicating with you directly. This preaching the Dharma is the Dharma preaching. It is neither sentient nor insentient. It is neither intentional doing nor non-doing. It is not causally connected with doing and non-doing, and it is not something that arises from circumstances. At the same time, it does not follow the way of the birds. It is given to a Buddhist assembly. Excuse me. When the great state of truth is completely realized, preaching the Dharma is completely realized. When the Dharma treasury is transmitted, preaching the Dharma is transmitted. At the time of picking up a flower, preaching the Dharma is picked up. And at the time of transmitting the robe, preaching the Dharma is transmitted. For this reason, the Buddhas and the patriarchs have, in like fashion, paid homage to preaching the Dharma since prior to the King of majestic voice, and have practiced preaching the Dharma as their original practice since prior to the Buddhas themselves. the king of majestic voice, is the name of a Buddha of the infinite past. Do not learn only that preaching the Dharma has been orchestrated by Buddhist patriarchs. Buddhist patriarchs have been orchestrated by preaching the Dharma. This preaching the Dharma is not merely the expounding of the 84,000 gates of Dharma. It includes countless and boundless gates of Dharma preaching. Did I do the tissue? I had a tissue. There it is. So professional. Do not learn that later Buddhas preach as Dharma, the Dharma preaching of former Buddhas. Just as former Buddhas do not come back as later Buddhas, so it is also in preaching the Dharma. Former preaching of the Dharma is not used as later preaching of the Dharma. For this reason, Shakyamuni Buddha says, "In the same manner that the Buddhas of the 3 times preach the Dharma, so now do I also preach the Dharma that is without distinction." It's from the Lotus Sutra. Thus, in the same way that Buddhas utilize preaching the Dharma, Buddhas utilize preaching the Dharma. In the same way that Buddhas utilize preaching the Dharma, Buddhas utilize preaching the Dharma. I wonder if there's a different emphasis. And in the same way that Buddhas authentically transmit preaching the Dharma, Buddhas authentically transmit preaching the Dharma. Therefore, having been authentically transmitted from Buddhas of the eternal past to the 7 Buddhas, and having been authentically transmitted from the 7 Buddhas to today, there exists the non-emotional preaching the Dharma. In this non-emotional preaching the Dharma, the Buddhas are present and the patriarchs are present. Do not learn that "I now preach the Dharma" expresses an innovation that differs from the authentic tradition, and do not experience the time-honored authentic tradition as if it were an old nest in a demon's cave. National Master Daisho of Kotakuji Temple in the western capital. There were 5 cities in Tang, China at the time, but here it refers to the present-day Laoyang. Okay, in the western capital is fine. In the great kingdom of Tang, the story goes, is asked by a monk, can the insentient really preach the Dharma or not? The National Master says, they are always preaching ardently. They preach without interval. The monk says, why do I not hear it? The National Master says, whether or not you hear it yourself, you should not disturb others who do hear it. The monk says, I wonder what kind of person is able to hear it. The National Master says, saints are able to hear it. The monk says, does the Master hear it or not? The National Master says, I do not hear it. The monk says, if the Master himself does not hear it, how does he know that the insentient preach the Dharma? The National Master says, it is convenient that I do not hear it. If I heard it, I would be on the level of the saints, and then you would not be able to hear me preaching the Dharma. The monk says, so living beings are without the means to hear. The National Master says, I preach for living beings, I do not preach for saints. The monk says, what are living beings like after they hear? The National Master says, at that time they are beyond living beings. Beginners and later students who wish to learn and practice the non-emotional preaching the Dharma should get straight into diligent research of this story of the National Master. They are always preaching ardently, they preach without interval. Always is a concrete time of many instants. They preach without interval, given that preaching is already manifest in reality, it is inevitably without interval. we should not learn that the manner in which the insentient preach the Dharma must necessarily be as in the case of the sentient. Footnote, because the state of the sentient is sometimes emotional, but the state of the insentient is always non-emotional. Fair enough. To suppose that the manner in which the insentient preach the Dharma might accord with the voices of the sentient, and with the manner in which the sentient preach the Dharma, and thus to wrest voices from the sentient world and to liken them to the voices of the insentient world, is not Buddhism. The insentient preaching the Dharma may not always be sound as matter, just as the sentient preaching the Dharma is not sound as matter. Footnote, just as a Buddhist lecture is not only sound but also meaning, so a mountain stream not only produces sound but also expounds Buddhist teaching. I like that. Now, asking ourselves and asking others, we must endeavour to learn in practice what is the sentient state and what is the insentient state. That being so, we should painstakingly apply our mind to learning in practice how the non-emotional might preach the Dharma. Stupid people think that the rustling of trees in the forest and the opening and falling of leaves and flowers are the non-emotional preaching the Dharma, but they are not practitioners of the Buddha Dharma. Or in Master Dōgen's view, footnote, nature can only teach us the truth when we ourselves are balanced or non-emotional. If it was so, who could fail to know the non-emotional preaching the Dharma? And who could fail to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma? Let us reflect for a while. In the non-emotional world, are there any grass, trees, and forests, or not? Is the non-emotional world infiltrated by the emotional world, or not? No. To recognize, on the contrary, that grass, trees, tiles, and pebbles are the non-emotional is to be incomplete in learning. And to recognize the non-emotional as grass, trees, tiles, and pebbles is not to have experienced satisfaction. Though we shall now consider the grass, trees, and so on that are seen by human beings and discuss them as the non-emotional, those very grass, trees, and so on are beyond the common intellect. For there are great differences between the forests of the heavens above and those of the human world. The produce of a civilized nation is not the same as that of a remote land, and grass and trees in the ocean are totally unlike those in the mountains. Still more, there are trees that grow in space, and there are trees that grow in clouds. Among the hundred weeds and myriad trees that sprout and grow amid wind, fire, and so on, there are generally those that can be understood as sentient, those that are not recognized as insentient, and those weeds and trees which seem to be humans and animals, sentient and insentient, have never been clearly distinguished. Still more, when we see a hermit's trees, stones, flowers, fruits, hot springs, and cool waters, they are utterly beyond doubt. But how could they not be difficult to explain? Barely having seen the weeds and trees of China, or having become familiar with the weeds and trees of Japan, do you not think that similar situations may be present through the whole universe in myriad directions? The National Master says, this is about 10 pages, isn't it? The National Master says the saints are able to hear it. That is, in orders where the non-emotional preaches the Dharma, the saints stand on the ground and listen. Standing on the ground suggests politeness and eagerness to hear. The saints and the non-emotional both realize hearing and realize preaching. The non-emotional does indeed preach the Dharma to saints, but it is sacred, or but is it sacred or is it common? It is neither. Sacred footnote. As a noun, shō as a noun means saint or sacred being. As an adjective means sacred. It's the same word. In other words, after we have clarified the manner in which the non-emotional preaches the Dharma, we are able to realize in physical experience that... Sorry, I'll start again. I got lost over the line. In other words, after we have clarified the manner in which the non-emotional preaches the Dharma, we are able to realize in physical experience that what the saints hear is as it is. Having attained realization in physical experience, we are able to fathom the state of the saints. Thereafter, we should learn in practice further action on the road through the night which transcends the common and transcends the sacred. The National Master says, I do not hear it. Do not suppose that even these words are easy to understand. Does he not hear because he transcends the common and transcends the sacred? Or does he not hear because he rips apart the nests of the common and the sacred? With effort like this, we should realize the Master's expression. The National Master says, it is convenient that I do not hear it. If I heard it, I would be on the level of the saints. This elucidation is never one truth or two truths. Footnote is an expression of the whole truth of the National Master, who lived not by hard and fast rules, but by changing his behavior to suit circumstances. He kept his teaching at a level which could be understood by the listener. The convenient I is beyond the common and the sacred. This is I, capital I. Might the convenient I be a Buddhist patriarch? Because Buddhist patriarchs transcend the common and transcend the sacred, what they hear may not be exactly the same as what the saints hear. Researching the truth of the National Master's words, then you would not be able to hear me preaching the Dharma, we should consider the Bodhi of the Buddhas and the saints. The point is this: when the non-emotional preach the Dharma, the saints are able to hear. But when the National Master preaches the Dharma, that concrete monk is able to hear. Day upon day and month upon month, we should endeavour to learn this truth. Now I would like to ask the National Master, I do not ask what living beings are like after they hear, but what are living beings like just in the moment of hearing you preach the Dharma? The founding patriarch, Great Master Tozan Gohon, or Master Tozan Ryokai, while practicing under the ancestral patriarch Great Master Ungan asks, what people are able to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma? The ancestral patriarch Ungan says, the non-emotional are able to hear the non-emotional preaching of the Dharma. The founding patriarch says, does the master hear it or not? The ancestral patriarch says, if I hear it, then you will not be able to hear my preaching of the Dharma. The founding patriarch says, if that is so, I would rather not hear the master's preaching of the Dharma. The ancestral patriarch says, you do not even hear me preaching the Dharma. How much less do you hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma? Then the founding patriarch sets forth the following verse and presents it to the ancestral patriarch. How very wonderful, how very wonderful. The non-emotional preaching the Dharma is a mystery. If we listen with the ears, it is ultimately too difficult to understand. If we hear the sound through the eyes, we are able to know it. Footnote, in general, ears represent intellectual understanding, whereas eyes represent intuitive understanding, or the viewpoint of real experience. This story is recorded in Shinji Shōbōgenzō, Part 2, number 48. The truth expressed now in the founding patriarch's words, what people are able to hear the emotion. truth expressed now in the founding patriarch's words, what people are able to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma should be painstakingly researched through the effort of one life and many lives. This question is also equipped with the virtue of an assertion. Footnote, a what person means a person in the ineffable state. And this assertion has the skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. It is not only the mind being transmitted by the mind, describes intuitive communication. Transmission of the mind by the mind is the pursuit of beginners and late learners. But there is a pivotal matter which has been authentically transmitted by means of the robe and authentically transmitted by means of the Dharma. How can people today expect to realize it as the ultimate in only 3 or 4 months of effort? The founding patriarch has already experienced the principle expressed in the past by the national master that the saints are able to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma. And yet he now asks further, what people are able to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma? Should we see this as affirmation of the national master's words, or as non-affirmation of the national master's words? Should we see it as a question or as an assertion? If he does not completely affirm the national master, how could he speak words like these? And if he completely affirms the national master, how could he understand words like those? 2 footnotes. Because Master Dōgen completely affirms the national master, he wants to investigate further the national master words that the saints are able to hear the non-emotional preaching the Dharma. And because Master Dōgen completely affirms the national master, he absorbs the national master's words without trying to understand them intellectually. I think we're on 22 minutes already. I think that's enough. We'll come back to this tomorrow. How could he understand words like those? Paragraph 70, page 99. All right. Thanks for listening. Take care.